The night was colder than usual in the small Baptist town of Hartsfield. The wind slipped through the cracks of the wooden chapel, whispering through empty pews as Pastor Michael knelt at the altar, asking God for guidance. Outside, the world seemed silent, but deep down he could hear the echo of hunger, fear, and abandonment, the voices of the children he had seen sleeping under the bridge that morning. Something inside him shifted that day. He knew faith wasn't just about words or sermons. It was about hands willing to lift the fallen. For years, Pastor Michael had preached about compassion, but compassion without action had begun to feel like hypocrisy. The church was growing, donations were steady, and Sunday services overflowed with smiles and polite amens. Yet beyond the stained glass windows, reality was cruel and forgotten. He saw those children, barefoot, trembling, eyes wide with exhaustion, and something in his heart broke. That night, he decided to bring them home. 13 homeless children, 13 souls no one else wanted to see. His modest parsonage was never meant to hold so many. The kitchen table became a classroom, the living room, an improvised dormitory. There were laughter and prayers mixed with tears and fear. Each night they prayed together for food, safety, and tomorrow. To the pastor, it felt like a revival of the soul. To the town, however, it was the beginning of scandal. Rumors began to spread faster than mercy itself. At first, it was just whispers after church, soft, cautious, but poisonous. Why are those children in his house? Where are their parents? What's he really doing with them? The same people who once applauded his sermons now looked at him with suspicion. Their faith seemed to vanish the moment his compassion became inconvenient. Still, Pastor Michael smiled through it, believing love would silence judgment. But faith, he would soon learn, doesn't always protect the faithful. In small towns like Hartsfield, righteousness was often measured by reputation, not by sacrifice. And as the light of his actions grew, so did the shadows behind him. It didn't take long for whispers to grow into a storm. The church elders called a meeting, their faces tight with disapproval and fear of gossip. "This is not how we do things," one of them said, voice trembling with authority. "We must protect the church's image." Pastor Michael listened quietly, heart heavy, but the eyes of the 13 children he had welcomed that morning were louder than any fear. He felt a deep responsibility, a duty that transcended rules or reputation. Love, he realized, sometimes means standing alone. Word spread through the town like wildfire. Neighbors stared from behind curtains. Conversations hushed when his name was mentioned. The headlines hadn't come yet, but judgment had arrived. The children were called intruders, burdens, or problems that didn't belong in polite society. And yet every night Pastor Michael tucked each of them into bed, whispering prayers that their faith would be stronger than the world's cruelty. He began to understand that courage was not loud, it was persistent, quiet, and unwavering. The local church board demanded explanations. Letters were sent. Meetings were scheduled. Accusations of negligence and improper behavior began to shadow his every step. The pastor felt the walls closing in, but still, he saw the light in the children's eyes, the small victories of laughter at breakfast, drawings left on the fridge, the slow thawing of fear into trust. In those moments, he knew he couldn't surrender. Faith, after all, was not measured by approval, but by sacrifice. Yet the pressure grew unbearable. Some congregants stopped attending services. Friends he had trusted for decades began avoiding him. Every gesture of kindness he had extended was twisted into suspicion. The pastor walked through the empty halls of the chapel, praying for strength. He had opened his home out of love, and now that love was being weaponized against him. The bitterness of betrayal began to seep into the corners of his heart. Even as the storm raged outside, inside his home there was still warmth. The children were learning, growing, healing from wounds the world had inflicted. Their laughter reminded him why he had taken this path. Each small hand held in his own, each tear wiped away, reinforced a truth he would cling to, no matter the cost. Saving 13 lives was worth more than pleasing 1,000 critics. The letters became demands. The meetings turned into trials of his character. The church elders accused Pastor Michael of overstepping boundaries, of bringing shame to the congregation. Every word felt like a blade slicing through the life he had built. Yet as he stood before them, he felt no anger, only a deep sorrow for a community that had forgotten what faith was truly meant to be. He had opened his doors to the helpless, and now he was being punished for the courage to care. The children sensed the tension, their small faces clouded with confusion and fear. Some asked why the church didn't like him anymore, why whispers followed him like shadows. He knelt beside them, holding their hands, trying to explain in words simple enough for hope to survive. "We do what's right, even when others don't understand," he said softly, though inside his heart ached. Every hug, every whispered prayer was a shield against the cruelty of judgment outside his walls. Rumors escalated to formal accusations. Parents complained, neighbors threatened legal action, and the pastor's reputation crumbled. Yet despite the mounting pressure, he refused to abandon the children. Every night, he listened to their stories, wiped away tears, and prayed for a world that seemed determined to punish kindness. The very community he had served for decades now turned its back on him, blind to the love that had filled his home. The media caught wind of the story. Headlines screamed outrage, painting him as reckless, a man who had interfered where he shouldn't have. But Michael's truth was simple. Love has no rules, no hierarchy, no concern for reputation. He watched the fear in the children's eyes and knew that losing them, not the judgment of strangers, was the only thing that mattered. Their trust had become his lifeline, their innocence his reason to endure. The elders demanded he return the children or face expulsion from the church. He refused. Standing in the empty chapel, he could hear the echoes of past sermons, his own voice reminding him of God's true commandment, to love and protect the vulnerable. He realized that sometimes faith required breaking traditions, challenging authority, and standing alone against the tide. His choice was clear, though it came with unbearable cost. Even as the church moved to cancel him publicly, Pastor Michael held firm. Inside his home, life continued. Laughter and tears intertwined, a fragile yet radiant tapestry of resilience. Every child he had taken in became a testament to the power of mercy over judgment, hope over fear. And in those quiet moments, when the world seemed most cruel, he felt the undeniable truth. Compassion is stronger than condemnation, and love, no matter the cost, can never be silenced. Inside the parsonage, the atmosphere was heavy yet alive with fragile hope. The children clung to one another, their small hands seeking comfort against the uncertainty that had suddenly invaded their lives. Some cried quietly at night, haunted by words they didn't understand, whispers of judgment they overheard from adults who were supposed to protect them. Pastor Michael sat by their side, holding them close, murmuring prayers into the darkness, promising them safety and love, even when the world outside seemed determined to deny it. Every morning brought new challenges. The once bright smiles of breakfast were tinged with fear, every knock on the door sparking anxiety. Letters from the church and angry neighbors piled on the table, a relentless reminder that kindness was being punished. Yet amidst the tension, small victories emerged. A child who had refused to eat found solace in Pastor Michael's gentle guidance. A shy boy spoke his first word in months. Each moment of growth was a quiet rebellion against the cruelty surrounding them. Outside, the town was divided. Some congregants whispered praise for his bravery, but most whispered condemnation, spreading rumors that painted him as reckless, naive, and dangerous. The pastor's reputation was being shredded in hushed tones at dinner tables and loud conversations at local cafes. And yet, within the walls of his home, life continued. The children's laughter, their drawings on the walls, the nightly prayers, they were living proof that love could thrive even under attack. One rainy afternoon, a young girl approached him with tears in her eyes, holding a small, worn notebook. "Will they take us away?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Pastor Michael knelt, looking into eyes that had already seen more than any child should. "No," he whispered. "We will face this together. We are family now, and family never abandons each other." Her small hand gripped his tightly, and in that moment he felt the weight of his choice, the risk, the opposition, the potential loss, but also the undeniable power of unwavering compassion. The nights were the hardest. Shadows crept into the corners of the rooms, and every creak of the old house sounded like judgment knocking on the door. He often sat alone in the dim light, reflecting on the path he had chosen. Would history remember him as a hero, or would it brand him as a fool? Yet with every heartbeat he felt a quiet certainty. Saving 13 lives, giving them hope and home, mattered far more than the opinion of a fearful congregation. In their eyes, he had already succeeded. Through it all, a strange beauty emerged, a portrait of resilience, faith, and love, unshaken by cruelty. The pastor and the children became a living testament that the human spirit could endure, that mercy could defy condemnation, and that hope, even in the darkest circumstances, could ignite a light no storm could extinguish. In the silence between laughter and tears, one truth became undeniably clear. Sometimes the greatest miracles are born not in churches, but in hearts willing to act when the world looks away. The town's judgment grew louder with each passing day. News of Pastor Michael's actions reached neighboring communities, and suddenly, his story became a cautionary tale. Letters turned into petitions, whispers into formal complaints, and every friendly nod in the street carried suspicion. Friends avoided him, neighbors stared from behind curtains, and even some of his closest congregants questioned his judgment. The pastor felt the weight of isolation pressing down, yet he remained steadfast, knowing the children's trust was the only validation that mattered. Legal threats began to surface, fueled by those who believed he had overstepped boundaries. Lawyers and officials became unexpected participants in the moral battle he had never sought, questioning his authority, scrutinizing his every decision. But for every paper that landed on his desk, there was a child smiling, a homework completed, a tiny hand grasped in hope. Each small act of progress reminded him why he refused to bow to fear or social expectation. Love was a higher law, and it demanded courage. Inside the parsonage, life was a delicate balance between chaos and care. Mealtimes were crowded, bedrooms full, and the living room doubled as a school and sanctuary. Yet in the midst of the crowded chaos, laughter often erupted, ringing through the house as a defiant protest against the storm outside. The pastor watched them, feeling both exhaustion and profound gratitude. The children were no longer merely survivors. They were thriving even as the world threatened to pull them away. Some neighbors began to speak out in his defense, inspired by his unwavering commitment. Letters of support trickled in, voices of gratitude and admiration rising above the cacophony of judgment. But for every ally, there seemed to be 10 critics, sharpening their words like knives. The pastor's heart carried the dual weight of fear and hope, knowing that every stand he took risked condemnation, but also had the potential to inspire others to act with courage and compassion. The church board escalated its efforts. Official meetings were scheduled to decide his fate, their language formal, but filled with implied condemnation. They spoke of rules and precedent, but Pastor Michael heard only one command: to protect the innocent. As he walked through the familiar halls of the chapel, he felt the walls closing in with expectation and suspicion, but in the sanctuary of his home, he felt freedom, the freedom to do what was right without compromise. And so, the battle raged on, both visible and unseen. The pastor and the children existed in a fragile bubble of love and protection, while the world outside threatened to tear it apart. Every decision carried risk, every act of kindness became controversial. Yet, through the fear, the lawsuits, and the relentless scrutiny, a quiet determination burned within him, to defend the lives he had saved, to nurture hope where it had been nearly extinguished, and to show that true faith is measured not by compliance, but by courage. Slowly, the tide began to shift. Some townspeople, once quick to judge, started seeing the truth behind the rumors. They watched the children grow stronger, healthier, and more joyful under Pastor Michael's care. The laughter that filled his modest home could no longer be ignored. People began to wonder, could it be that compassion, not conformity, was the measure of true faith? The question hung in the air like a fragile hope, ready to bloom. Neighbors who had turned away started leaving small offerings at the parsonage, groceries, clothes, and toys for the children. Notes of encouragement appeared in mailboxes, sometimes unsigned, simple words: "Thank you for caring." The pastor read them quietly, a mix of relief and disbelief swelling in his chest. The world had not completely abandoned them. Slowly, hearts began to soften, and the whispers of condemnation were replaced with murmurs of admiration. Even some members of the church, bound by tradition yet moved by evidence of his dedication, began speaking up in his favor. At first it was cautious, almost reluctant. "Perhaps we judged too quickly," they admitted. "Maybe love looks different than we imagined." For the first time in weeks, Pastor Michael felt the stirrings of acceptance, not from everyone, but enough to remind him that righteousness, though often lonely, could inspire change. The children, sensing the change in the air, began to flourish. They explored the world with renewed confidence, learned to read and write, and found joy in games and stories that once seemed out of reach. Their progress became a living testament to the power of steadfast care, and every small achievement illuminated the truth Pastor Michael had always known. A single act of mercy could ripple through countless lives, changing not only the children, but the hearts of those around them. The media that had once vilified him began to shift its tone as well. Stories emerged highlighting the courage and selflessness of the pastor and the resilience of the children. The headlines transformed from scandal to inspiration, documenting a man who had risked everything to protect the innocent. Slowly, the world outside the parsonage began to recognize the quiet heroism that had been there all along. And in the quiet moments, when the children slept peacefully and the house was still, Pastor Michael allowed himself a deep, contemplative breath. The storm had not completely passed, but the seeds of understanding and gratitude were taking root. He had stood alone in the face of condemnation, and now, slowly, the world was learning that true faith is measured not by acceptance, but by the courage to love when no one else will. Time passed, and the small parsonage became more than just a home. It became a sanctuary of hope. The 13 children, once abandoned and fearful, now flourished under Pastor Michael's unwavering care. Their laughter echoed through the halls, a testament to the power of mercy and courage. Every scraped knee healed, every tear wiped away, was a quiet victory over the judgment that had once threatened to undo them all. Love had triumphed where fear had once ruled. The community, once quick to condemn, now watched in awe. Some quietly admitted their shame, others publicly expressed gratitude. The pastor's actions had challenged them, forcing a confrontation with their own definitions of faith, morality, and courage. Slowly, hearts that had been hardened by suspicion began to soften, inspired by a man who had risked everything to uphold what truly mattered. The lesson was clear. Righteousness is not measured by popularity, but by action. Despite the scars left by opposition, Pastor Michael remained steadfast, unbroken in his resolve. Each day brought new challenges, yet he met them with the same quiet determination that had guided him from the beginning. The children's trust was the anchor that held him steady, and the smiles that greeted him each morning were the rewards that no judgment or rumor could take away. True heroism, he realized, often thrives in silence, unseen and unrecognized by the world. The media's attention shifted completely. Stories that once painted him as reckless now highlighted his courage and compassion. He became a symbol, not for perfection, but for the relentless pursuit of justice and mercy. Letters, calls, and visits came from far beyond the town, offering support and admiration. Slowly, the narrative changed, from scandal to inspiration, from condemnation to celebration. The power of love had rewritten the story. That night, the pastor would sit quietly in the living room, watching the children sleep, their faces peaceful and safe. The storms of judgment had passed, leaving behind a landscape transformed by courage and devotion. In those moments, he reflected on the journey, the fear, the loneliness, the opposition, and ultimately the unyielding truth that had guided him all along. Compassion, even when it comes at a great cost, can change lives and even communities. In the end, Pastor Michael's story became a testament to the enduring power of mercy. The children he had saved grew with hope in their hearts, carrying forward the lessons of love and bravery he had instilled. The town, once quick to condemn, learned that true faith is measured not by rules or appearances, but by the courage to stand for what is right. And for those who witnessed it, the story lingered. a reminder that even in a world full of judgment, a single act of love can illuminate the darkest corners of humanity.